I'm glad to see that we have a pretty good mix here of researchers, both Union and Confederate. I will be talking a little bit about both. To give you a little bit of my background, in my direct line ancestors, I have 9 Civil War veterans. I have 5 who fought for the Union and 3 who fought for the Confederacy. And I have 1 soldier who fought in both armies. He actually, and I'll be showing you a few of his records throughout this presentation, as well as some others. But he actually was originally he was in Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. I believe he was conscripted, though I haven't found any conscription records. But he was in the Confederate cavalry, deserted the Army, was captured by the Union, and taken to Philadelphia. And then, while in Philadelphia, he signed an oath of allegiance to the United States and joined a Pennsylvania cavalry unit. And my joke that I like to tell about him is that he had to join a cavalry unit so that he had a horse to ride home. I want to go over very briefly what we're going to be talking about during this hour. I'm going to first give a very, very brief introduction to the Civil War. I then am going to discuss identifying a soldier ancestor. And this is an important aspect of this because not all of us know to even look. And you know, that's something that surprised me as I was doing my research on my family. You know, I didn't always know that I should even be looking to see if some of my ancestors served in the Civil War. I then want to talk about compiled service records, which is kind of our gateway to many other records. And finally, I want to talk about pension application files. And then I will briefly also discuss a few other sources of information that some people are not aware of. So my basic introduction to the Civil War is that the states in the North are in the Union and the states in the South are in the Confederacy. There are also a few states right along the borderline that are considered border states that, generally speaking, stayed in the Union. They did not officially secede, although several of them, including, I believe, Kentucky in particular, but I believe also Missouri, did actually have two competing governments, one that stayed loyal to the Union and one that was loyal to the Confederacy. And within these border states, you will find, and those are Kentucky, Missouri, Maryland primarily, but also Delaware. You will find that even though the states themselves stayed loyal to the Union, there were Confederate regiments that were raised within those states. So, for example, Maryland, you know, you have a Confederate Maryland infantry, and you know, even though Maryland did not secede from the Union. Anything beyond that, there are literally thousands, if not millions, of books about the Civil War. You can walk into any bookstore or library and or go on Google Books or, you know, any number of other sources wherever you tend to do your reading and find out just about anything you want about the Civil War. It's been explored and re-explored so many times over the past 150 years, and it's really just getting ramped up with the sesquicentennial over the past couple years. So I want to talk about identifying a soldier ancestor. The first question you need to ask yourself is, was he old enough? And the official dates, the official ages, I should say, that were in use for Army service during the period of the Civil War was between the ages of 18 and 44. So if you have any male ancestors, no matter what state they lived in, that were between the ages of 18 and 44, it would be a good idea to check to see if he may have served. If you have, brothers of some of your ancestors, or, even first cousins, if they were close, if they had a close extended family, you want to check anyone between the ages of 18 and 44. But you also want to keep your mind open, because soldiers were not the only ones in the Civil War. They were not the only ones who, I won't say necessarily fought, but there were other people. There were, people serving as ministers. There were people serving as, drummer boys and other positions within the military that were not necessarily soldiers. And you can see from this photo right here, which was actually downloaded from the Library of Congress Civil War Photographs collection, there were some young people on the front lines. The first thing you should do is to check the federal census. I say that that's the first thing that you should do because, in general, most of us, that's the first thing we do in our research. So, while you're doing that, looking for their names and where they lived and their ages and, all of that other information we use census records for, you also have to be aware that some of these censuses asked questions specifically about military service. Primarily the 1930, 1910, and 1890. And the reason that these three censuses in particular asked questions about service in the military is because during these periods there were actually changes that were being made to the pension laws. And in your handout, if you purchase the DVD, the handout will be on the DVD. I actually have a link for an article that was written by the University of Chicago, a student at the University of Chicago, exploring the military pension laws from the time of the Civil War up through the early 20th century. And these these laws, these changes in the laws were affected, and that's, one of the main reasons that they take the census is to gather statistical information, and that statistical information from the 1890 and 1910, 1930 censuses were used to make these changes in the pension laws. So the 1930 census asks, in columns 30 and 31, you can see there, whether each resident was a veteran of U.S. military or naval forces. Yes or no, what war or expedition. Now, if you do the math, in 1930, the war had ended 65 years previously. In 1865 to 1930, that's 65 years. So if someone was 18, then they would have been 83 years old in 1930. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of Civil War veterans still hanging around in 1930, but there were some. There were definitely, a significant number of Civil War veterans who would be, who would appear in the 1930 census. And this is a good way to know that, is if you have someone age 83 or up who did serve in the Civil War, check these columns 30 and 31 to see if they may have served and if they were recorded as having served. The 1910 census is a little bit better. Number one, it asks specifically about Civil War service. It asks whether the resident was a survivor of the Union or Confederate Army or Navy. And what you'll see in that column, that's, I believe column 39, you will either see a UA or a UN or a CA or a CN, and that would be UA for Union Army and so on. In 1910, of course, people who had who were 18 in 1865, they would have only been, let's see, 63. So you definitely see a lot more Civil War veterans who had survived through 1910. Now, we all know that in 1890 the federal census was burned. If you happen to be lucky enough that the population schedule still exists, there is actually a question on that population schedule about military service. But since so very few of the population censuses exist, I'm not going to dwell too much on that. You will want to check, if it's available in your area of research, would be a special schedule that was recorded in conjunction with the 1890 census, and this was specifically to record any veterans of the Union Army. It is specifically Union, but in some of the southern states, they did record the names and information about Confederate veterans, even though that was contrary to what they were supposed to be recording. That was contrary to the instructions. In some states, you have to thank your lucky stars that they didn't follow the instructions and they recorded Confederate veterans as well. Excuse me. Now this schedule is specifically, like I said, about Union military service, and it's in two parts. If you look at the first two columns here, this is the top half. The first two columns record the house number and family number, which refers back to the original population schedule, which of course has been destroyed. But me being a bit of a records geek, I just love seeing what those original house and family numbers were. And you can also tell when you look at them if there were people living next door to each other who served, if there were people, living even in the same household. You can still make those determinations from that house and family number, even though you don't have the original enumeration. Of course, then it gives the name of the soldier. If the soldier was deceased, it would give the names. It would give the names of the widows. So, for example, on lines 8, where it lists Hiram Clute. Now, Hiram Clute would not have appeared in the population schedule at all. You would have seen his widow, Amanda E. And it says Amanda E., widow of Hiram Clute. So that actually gives information about military service of someone who is deceased. Again, like I said, that he would not have appeared on the population schedule. So looking at the population schedule, all you would see is Amanda and any of the people who lived in her household. So, you can get more than just military information from this. You also have evidence of marriage. The next columns will be the rank. You will see the company and the regiment. And then moving on, date of enlistment, and the term of service. It's interesting. You have to be real careful because not everyone could remember the exact dates that they enlisted. Not everyone could remember the exact date of discharge or the exact length of service. Line 1 is a perfect example. He says 1861 to 1864. Well, he obviously doesn't mean January 1st, 1861 because the war hadn't started yet. And it's unlikely that he means December 31st, 1864 either. He knows he served about 3 years from 1861 to 1864. He doesn't remember the information. The next line, you have a little bit more specific information. You can see he has the exact date that he served and the exact date of discharge and the length of service. So, just like with any census record, the quality of information that you're going to be able to gather is going to vary from person to person and household to household. In case anyone's curious, my ancestor actually appears on line 6, William H. Posson. He was my grandmother's grandfather.